Cancer. Just the word is terrifying. Being told you have cancer is devastating. You are about to go on the worst imaginable emotional roller coaster. You're going to have rage and fear and sorrow and denial and depression. There'll be panic, impending doom. The question you're going to ask is, am I going to die? What now? What happens next? What type of surgery do I have to have? What's chemo like? What's radiation? How sick am I going to be? Am I going to lose my hair? What's the impact going to be in my relationship with my family, with my children? What are the after effects? Where do I go for support? Ladies and gentlemen, this episode, we're calling it Cancer is Never Invited and Cancer Never Leaves. And that was trademarked by my friend Diane Simard, who was a former guest on this show. Well, today we're going to find out where you can go to get that help. We have filmmaker Darla Rae. She made a documentary called Courageous Warriors, Beauty from the Ashes. And in this documentary, which is not out yet, but we're working on getting it out, she goes into every aspect of cancer by talking to the people who have lived through it. The person with the disease, the family, the friends, the caretakers. Let's get right to her story. Darla, welcome to Life Altering Events.
Hey, thank you, Frank. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So you're a filmmaker. Give us a quick, short background on your filmmaking life.
Yes. Well, I originally started acting at like the age of 8 in California, on stage and all that. Went into film like when I was 18 as an actor. But back in the day, nobody told you as a female, you could write or direct or produce. So I decided to try that about 23 years ago. So I made a film about spinal cord injuries, athletes playing wheelchair rugby. And as a result of that, people started bringing me these stories, and I'm kind of become the filmmaker with a mission to raise awareness. So whether I do a documentary or a narrative feature with actors, my films always raise awareness. And that's really how I got started.
Outstanding. All right, here's the big question. Why did you do this documentary?
Well, I actually had a short film that was dealing with 20-year-old women getting breast cancer. It was a short narrative. A friend had written it. And in the course of finding locations and needing people involved with fitting women with mastectomy bras, I met these incredible women had been doing this kind of venture for 20, 30 years. And then I said, gosh, I should do a story about them. And they said, no, you need to do a story about these survivors. And they started telling me all these stories about these women. And I thought, oh my gosh, these guys are courageous warriors, and they were creating this beauty from their ashes, so to speak. And so one person led to another and led to another. And we interviewed like over 100 people to finally put together what you've seen. Mm-hmm. And as a result, my mother passed away from breast cancer at the age of 60. It came back. She didn't quite make 5 years after her initial diagnosis. And I was her caregiver for the first time around. My father cared for her the second time around. And then about 5, 6 years ago, a really good friend of mine, she was my best friend at the time, texted me and said, my cancer's back. I need to see you. And as a result of that, I ended up being a caregiver for her just at the moment of time. And unfortunately, she lost her battle. And so I kind of have been carrying this idea around for years. I didn't know what to do with it. So I felt like I need to show a different point of view. People are surviving this because of the treatments, but like you say, the cancer never leaves. And so that's what really sent me on this journey. And it took me 3 years to make this film. I've never taken that length of time to make a film before.
Wow. It's amazing, ladies and gentlemen. I saw it. I was giving a complimentary view of it. And when it comes out, you have to watch this. Now, Darla, you went to the very beginning of this. So walk us through this process that you found from the moment the individual gets the call, you have cancer.
it's interesting because obviously, if you just think about it logically, it's like a bomb goes off. And it's not just the individual, it's this ripple effect to the immediate family, friends, acquaintances, work people, all of that. And it's like nobody knows what to do. They're shocked. And one of the spouses in our film, he likens it to, if you can imagine, and this was a perfect description. He's sitting in a room with your loved one, and it's like there's 100 different doors around you, and you don't know which door. Somebody's coming at you from this angle saying, you got to do this. Oh no, you need this treatment. Oh no, you need to do this. But before we do that, you got to do this. So they're having to make all of these decisions in such a short amount of time. They can't even logically process everything, the information. And it's just overwhelming. And really what I learned in talking with people is that, no, you really do have some time to take a step back and try to process some things, research some things for yourself, and ask questions. Say, okay, great, I got this diagnosis now. Let me write down, these are my questions. And then don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself and your spouse, partner, caregiver. They need to ask questions because maybe they have another question from a different point of view. But it literally, I'm always amazed. And when I made the film, I had people, all the people I had interviewed were on the other side of this journey. Right. And then a friend of mine's wife was diagnosed, and I've known them for 20 years. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't have that piece represented in the film. So I asked her, would you be willing to let me follow you through this beginning journey? At first she said no. And I was fine with that because you have to be respectful of the individuals. But she came back about 2 days later and said, I will do it. She said, because I thought, who am I not to help others when all these other women have laid out this stuff that are helpful to me? And so I really kind of walked through that journey with her. And no two stories that I interviewed, of all the people we interviewed, were exactly the same. So it's like, well, this person's going to get this treatment, but not this, and this is why. And then, okay, well, but this person got this treatment. So the person who gets the diagnosis is so overwhelmed that they just really don't know what is the right thing for them. And if you don't ask questions, there are medical professionals that will just tell you what their protocol is and what they've decided the protocol should be, instead of what might really be the best thing for you as an individual.
That's right. I think once having gone through cancer with my mother, you don't know what to say. You're just in complete, and like you said, it was like a bomb goes off, and I don't know what questions to ask. I didn't expect I would ever hear these words before. You encourage them to find their voice. Right.
Well, and for example, my experience, was helping my mother. So I had some questions, like, for example, when my friend, contacted me and said, I want to see you. And then I show up out in California to see her, and she's in the hospital, and all these people they're talking down to her. And this woman had 3 master's degrees and highly educated, intelligent individual. And I was like, whoa, stop. What does she want to do? And I asked her, I said, what do you want to do? She said, I want to go home. Okay, then let's make a list of what are the things that you want to see happen. But those people were so in shock that I would say that, like, stop. Let's ask her what she wants.
Yes.
And her husband wasn't able to emotionally handle it supportive wise. And so he basically said, look, you need to listen to whatever she says, meaning me, and whatever she's asking, you get it done. And he had to sign a paper to let me ask the questions, to work with my friend. So I experienced that. And that's why I was like, yeah, this is not how it should be. This bomb is going off, and they need to have a moment to hold hold their breath and go, okay, I have to deal with this. I don't know what to ask, but give me a moment.
Exactly. One of the things you did with this documentary is you broke it into sections. So it starts off and there's a break. Here's a section. One of the sections that caught my eye was called Ugly.
Yes.
What is ugly? What's the ugly?
The ugly is that it stays. It's always there. The ugly is every year on the anniversary of your surgery, you're like, oh, here's that mindset. Is something else going to happen? It's, you know, kind of like the good, the bad, the ugly. The ugly is that it's always there. People have anxieties. They are always thinking, well, how many years do I have? Is it going to come back? Some are so fearful that they haven't really dealt with it, because when that bomb goes off, you really can't emotionally deal with it. So if you picture an onion, you know, you're peeling off the layers of the onion. And so I've been surprised at people. Even I have a friend who you see in the film. She's an ER doc, and she was a Air Force flight surgeon. She said to me from the film, she said, here I am 15 years out, and I thought I had dealt with everything. She goes, I realized screening the film that I still have ugly. And here I thought I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so then she started talking about all of the ugly, you know, and as it turns out, this experience has caused her to take a step back from being an ER doc, and she's going to go work with people going through breast cancer. Maybe they don't have a good outcome diagnosis, you know, because she said, I feel like we live with so much of the ugly and the crap from that diagnosis, whether it's breast cancer or bladder cancer or MS or stroke or whatever. That's what the beauty of the film is. While it's based on breast cancer survivors and caregivers, it actually has a universal message that people can apply to whatever their given situation is.
Absolutely.
And so that ugly is just, you know, the devastation. There's always that thing hanging over your head. It's that black cloud, the what ifs. And, you know, I'm always amazed that when I talk with the individuals, I'm thinking, oh, they really got it all together. And they're like, no, I'm so fearful. I'm always fearful. I remember Diane telling me, and she writes about it in her book, you know, The Unlikely Gift of Breast Cancer, about, as you were speaking to me earlier, about when something happens, people come over, we're bringing food, they're showing up, and they're all supportive. And then they go away, and you're left alone with, in her case, this little Tupperware container that was empty, but it was a trigger for her because she remembered where she was at when they delivered that to her. And finally, she said, finally, she threw that out for that reason. But can you imagine just looking at a Tupperware container that triggers that emotion of all these people showed up, and then everybody's gone. And that's the thing. There is no support. That's part of the ugly. You know, people are like, oh, well, she's fine. They're out of the hospital. She's gone back to work. You know, it's the support is no longer there.
It's absolutely the case. Now, one of the things you spent a lot of time on was the role and the impact of the caretaker.
Right.
Touch on that.
Sure. Yeah, because basically, you know, they're just as devastated. And the worst thing is, I mean, looking at your loved one thinking, how do I help? What do I do? And generally they're like, oh, well, I'm in the support role over here. I just sit back here. You know, the caregiver, they have the same, you know, I mean, they're diagnosed just like their loved one, basically. And so, you know, they have to go to work. They have to continue to take care of their loved one, make the meals. Some of them have kids in college or high school and trying to tell them everything's going to be all right. And then at the end of the day, they're left alone with their thought. No one's asking them how they are.
Right.
Nobody ever asks the caregiver, how are you? Can I buy you a cup of coffee? Or, hey, I was making a meatloaf and I brought this meatloaf for you, kind of thing. And so they're shell shocked. And the worst thing is that, a lot of times the medical community, we don't do a good job at taking care of the whole family nucleus. Now, I know there is a gentleman, and I can't remember his name, but I think he was at UCLA. I read one of his papers, and he said his philosophy is you should be taking care of that whole nucleus. There should be counseling available, and for everyone. And that kind of leads into, COPE.
Yes.
Which is, a program that Diane Samard, our friend, put together, initiated, and is being taught to grad students going into psychology with an emphasis on oncology. And that whole program, the fact that they have a clinic set up with these grad students, that people can come on a sliding scale or for no money, whatever the case may be. They take Medicaid, whatever. And it's set up at the University of Denver in this case. Hopefully they'll be able to expand this to other universities to teach the grad students going into counseling. But they work with a whole family, like the caregiver, the kids, they're all devastated. I mean, like, is mommy going to die? Well, the father or the caregiver, I mean, even men get breast cancer. So it could even be the mom saying, I don't know. They don't know the answer.
Right.
And so that is the number one thing I think that affects the caregiver, is that they're trying to keep the life going around them, and nobody is asking them anything, and they're just falling apart.
One of the gentlemen in the documentary, he even brought tears in my eyes, and he was talking, and you could see the pain and the hurt as he's watching his wife just wither away, and he's trying to do everything he can. And he says the hardest thing, I believe, I'm going to paraphrase it. The hardest thing is keeping a stiff upper lip, for lack of a better term, while you're dying inside.
Right.
That's incredible.
It's true. And one of the guys talks about it, and I think it's the same gentleman, because he said, I don't know if they don't know the answers to tell you, or that you're supposed to figure it out, or, he said, I've just never found myself in this position, and I'm not that guy.
Right.
And really what it comes down to is the medical community, when they give that diagnosis. For example, I know somebody that's in the film. Her husband was sitting out in the waiting room. Why they're going to give her this? Why did you tell her to have someone come with you, only to leave them out in the waiting room and not bring them in, so that she's getting this message, this devastating diagnosis, without anybody there.
Yes. I've seen that. It's terrible.
And it happens over and over and over. And it's like, where is the compassion? Where is the compassion? This is not about bashing the medical community. It's about, let's be smart. Let's collectively be smart. And, in some things that people that I've interviewed for the documentary that have been in the last 5 years, their story is exactly the same as people that have had it 15, 20, 30 years ago. And I'm like, have we not got smarter? Let's try to do what we can to help the whole family. You have to have that advocacy. And fortunately, in some cases, people get nurse navigators or patient navigators, patient advocates, but people don't know to ask for it.
Exactly.
And if it's not offered, if you don't know what you don't know, you don't know to ask for that. I mean, I had a friend recently, he went through bladder cancer, and he called me because he said, I need help and I don't know what to do. And it was a case of this doctor's office wasn't talking to this doctor's office, who wasn't talking to the insurance, who wasn't talking with the pharmacy. He had to have a certain medication that he had to give himself an injection after chemo with so many days, and he was frantic. And he didn't mean to take it out on his spouse, but he took out the frustration, and then he felt bad about it. And I said, well, you need to call this one back and you need to ask for a nurse navigator, call this one back and ask for a patient advocate, let them do the fixing of it. And 30 minutes later, he called me back and said they fixed it and it's all done. But he did not know to ask.
Exactly. Touch on this a little bit more, Darla. There's a nurse navigator in the film. Touch on what it is they do.
So basically, the nurse navigator basically is your advocate. They will help you. You have a problem, you've lost your medication, you contact them. They do all the going through the medical community around all the obstacles that it would take you forever to get a person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they will take calls 24/7. They'll say, you know what, hold on, let me find out. I don't think you should do this. I think you should do something different, but I'm going to confirm it. And they will talk to you if you're having a side effect, something's happened, you've had surgery, you have complication happening, you describe the complication to the nurse navigator, because she is an RN. When the program originally started, it was lay people doing that navigation. Mm-hmm. But Dr. Harold Freeman, who created it originally, the patient navigation program, and I think Bush signed off the bill like in 1991, so that if you are a cancer research center, in order for you to get government funding, you have to have a patient navigator program. Mm-hmm. That evolved into the nurse navigation program. And 90%, if not more, of those that are nurse navigators have been through breast cancer.
Wow.
It's what I have found. All of the ones I've interviewed, they've all had breast cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have walked the journey. So they're so compassionate, and they say, look, nobody is ever going to go through what I went through. And I mean, they really rise to the occasion, and to the level of, I don't want my granddaughters or daughters or women, men down the road to ever have to go through that.
Absolutely. One other point that came up with the caretaker, caregiver, and this is heartbreaking also, was a young woman who got the diagnosis, and her, I don't know if it was a spouse or significant other, left. They just left.
He was her fiance. They were getting ready to be married, and he just left her. He left her in the hospital after she had her procedure. He said, I can't deal with this. And he left.
Is that something we see often?
A lot. I mean, I've spoken with, especially in the case, there have been cases where the spouse has left when, say a woman has, inflammatory breast cancer and is not eligible for reconstruction because there's too much damage to the tissue. Mm-hmm. Those cases a lot, where they're like, you look gross and, grotesque, and they just walk away. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, they're just not a good human being anyhow. So,
exactly.
But you find out what people are made of, and, it's interesting. I've heard stories, and then, like, for example, there was one couple, and I don't have this in the film, but it's hopefully will be in a series if we're able to get the film distributed and get into a series where we can get into more detail, where a couple got divorced. And I think they got divorced because she was trying to make everything, she was going through her cancer and trying to continue, like, I'm going to just keep everything normal, take the kids to football and cheerleading and act like everything's normal. And she's falling apart on the inside. So they end up in a divorce. And then she goes through Hope Held by a Horse, the equine therapy that we'll talk about here shortly. And she was so drastically changed emotionally that she called him up and said, this is what happened. And, was a completely different person. And so he comes back and he's like, what did you do to my wife? And, the person that started the program said, well, this is what we do. And it brings healing. It's therapeutic. And so now they've been remarried for several years. And now that person is the head of the Hope Held by a Horse program.
Yes, I remember her.
So it's so interesting. And this guy, if you knew this guy and you met him, I realized he was in so much pain. He just thought, I just need to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And that comes back to the whole lacking of the emotional caregiving component from the medical community, because they focus on the diagnosis, the treatment, and they're not looking at the emotional impact that occurs. It's PTSD is what it is. And
absolutely it is.
People associate PTSD with, oh, they have to have been in a war, get over it. Because I've had numerous people in the course of being interviewed from, different individuals. They'll say, well, it's just breast cancer. Well, has that bomb gone off in your life? Because just breast cancer doesn't cut it for me.
No, absolutely not. One of the things to take it to a positive note here is you talked about a great deal of these different support groups that came up. And there were two in particular, and I hope I pronounce this right. One is Pink Inc.
P Inc. Which is Personal Inc.
Personal Inc. And then the Hope Held by a Horse. Tell us about those. What are they doing to help?
Well, it's really interesting because I was not aware of P Inc., but I became aware because I was researching like with these women. And then I was like, so why do you have the tattoos? And then she told me about P Inc. And it basically, sometimes when women have a choice to get reconstruction, they get reconstruction, but they have these scars and they're very, they affect the person's psychic in a way that they look in the mirror when they're doing their hair and their makeup and they'll go, oh, it's so grotesque looking. Mm-hmm. And it's more for themselves. But the program P Inc., it's free to the person that applies. And they have tattoo artists that donate their time and they will talk to the person and say, what beautiful image would you imagine being on that scar? And then they tattoo that, whatever it is, whether it's a dove or one woman got a columbine flower because that was meaningful to her. And that it basically causes them to go, look at my art. And then they feel like this is kind of a badge of courage, that they can say to another person, look, I've been down your journey and this is why I have this tattoo. Mm-hmm. And so it's another way of healing to take place. Now, many women who have certain types of breast cancer cannot have reconstruction because there's too much damage and a reconstruction procedure will not take. And in the case, for example, the young woman you speak of who her fiance left her, she's 27 years old now. She was diagnosed when she was 22. She's had numerous reconstructions and the tissue is so damaged, it just won't take. Mm-hmm. So people, and then there are people that just choose like, having breasts do not define me, but I want something that's beautiful. And so they will go and get this chest piece that is, some of them are just so stunning, but there's a message usually in their artwork to have to do with their journey. Exactly. And so that actually it really does help people. Not everybody finds their way to that program because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to tattoo. That's not me.
Right.
But there is a large population that really have received healing by going through that process. And I can tell you, the day that we filmed, one of the gals in the film, she's a nurse navigator. I met her at Hope Held by a Horse. And she said, who have you talked to yet before today? And I said, oh, I spoke with some people at P Inc. She goes, I've been trying to get a tattoo forever for my scar. And she goes, I just know that it will make me feel better about myself. And I said, let me see what I can do. So I set it up that we could film it for the documentary. And that day, I can tell you, her husband, who is also a nurse, was sitting with me, and he had tears running down his cheek, and he kept saying, and he had his arm around me, he kept saying, I don't think you know what you've done for her right now. He said, I don't think you understand the impact. He goes, I can't thank you enough. And just tears running. And I thought, oh my gosh, if I can facilitate that even once in a blue moon for somebody as a result of the film, then this needs to be in the documentary. And more people need to know about it, because there are plenty of people that I've spoken to, they have no idea about this program.
One of the women in the film mentioned that as a woman, your breasts are one of your defining characteristics.
Right.
And they may be gone, but that's not you.
Right.
And the self-esteem was a big piece of this, that
Absolutely.
I'm still going to continue, and I will have something that I can look at and not feel dismayed or disgusted or sad.
Right.
To continue that. Now, the help with the horse, talk about that.
Oh my gosh. You know, I always have thought horses were beautiful from afar because they're so large. And I'm a little, I'll admit, I was a little fearful. And we went over to film the program and interview some. And it just so happened it was a group of nurse navigators going through the program and that day. And all of them were survivors, breast cancer survivors. And and I thought, okay, I'm going to really watch this. I want to see what this process is. And I thought, that's the day I decided I needed to tell my caregiver piece in the film, because I realized that even just being there, listening to them going through the program, for example, they do this obstacle course. And they have these obstacles laid out. And in this case, sometimes they have a frame built like a big square box with wood beams. And that's one obstacle. And they lay them all out and they ask them, look at these obstacles and see if there's any of these obstacles that even remotely, resemble something that you're battling with in your life as a result of your breast cancer. And there was this one gal there was a little staircase, and she said, I just can't get over this hump. I can't get over. And so the horses, it's really bizarre to watch, but it's so empowering. The horse, she's with the horse, and the horse would not let her go over to the next step until she dealt with her emotions about whatever was blocking her. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is absolutely beautiful. And the thing about it is that, there's small enough groups that these people come around you that have been through that same journey of the same diagnosis, of breast cancer. There's maybe a different kind, or their outcome is different, or whatever the case may be. But for that moment in time in that program, you have a support system that help you get over that hurdle along with these horses. And the horse would not let her go until she started talking about it. And it was like she had this emotional release, and then the horse took a step and she could go to the next step. And that day, a horse came up to me, and I'm a little fearful because they're so big, and it kind of butted me in, head against the chest. And I was like, okay, what, this horse doesn't like me. And the therapist said, no, the horse is telling you you're holding something in that part of your body that you need to let go of. And I was like, okay, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And she said, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? And I go, well, this documentary, and I'm thinking about my mom and my friend, you know, and because they didn't have this opportunity, this
Right.
program, and they didn't have their outcome. She said, you have to let go of that pain. And I was like, yeah, I've been carrying that grief around for almost 18 years in some places, you know?
Mhm.
And so that's when I decided that day, okay, I need to let it go. I decided that I would turn the camera on myself and talk about from the caregiving standpoint.
Mhm.
And so I can tell you, it's a beautiful program. This is the only program that does breast cancer, and
Mhm.
it's in Colorado. The ultimate goal is to showcase this, and those that are doing therapy, you know, horse equine therapy already, maybe they will consider adding option to their program so
Exactly.
that people in other states can experience the same thing. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
Well, our system doesn't seem to want to play nice here. We're just about out of time anyway. So Darla, what last thought do you want to leave with the viewers?
Well, you know, I just want people to realize that whatever your diagnosis is, breast cancer, doesn't matter, whatever that obstacle that's thrown at you that is a bomb, that you have the right and the ability to advocate for yourself, ask the questions. Your loved one needs to ask for questions, because they may think things differently that you're not even thinking of, because it's not clear. And that you don't have to settle for the first answer. You can ask, okay, I do want a second opinion. And, you know, my case, I hope with the film that people will get that message, but I want them to share the message. I want them to, you know, follow us at Facebook, Courageous Warriors, Beauty from the Ashes, because we'll be posting things as things become available, whether we find new resources for people. We want people to have options, and maybe they're in a part of the country they don't have something like that, so maybe they can. We just had somebody fly from Florida to Colorado this last weekend to go through this program.
Mhm.
So that's really what we're trying to do, is make it available to people in the message.
Outstanding. Well, as I said, we're just about out of time. I want to thank Darla Rae again. This story and this upcoming documentary are just amazing, and when it becomes available, you have to see it. And if you want to know how to help make it available, contact Darla, contact me. I will make sure it gets to her. It's called Courageous Warriors, Beauty from the Ashes. Now, ladies and gentlemen, no matter what life throws at you, whatever obstacle it's going to be, and we heard a ton of obstacles here today, do three things: look up, get up, never, ever give up. Pick up the pieces, start moving forward. Better times and better people will come into your life. If you want more information about Darla, you can go to her Facebook page again, or contact me. I'll make sure she gets it. You'll see this conversation on ROKU TV or on my YouTube channel. If you'll go to the YouTube channel, Frank Zaccari, please subscribe. Now, let me leave you with this, as I do every week. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Darla showed you where many of those rocks are. Join me again next week. We'll go into another life-altering event. Thank you again.